Hello, webinar attendees. We will get started here in a few seconds. Welcome to the 2025-2026 school year. Today's webinar is going to be all about competitive events. This webinar will be recorded and available through the advisor alert email that will be going out this week. The chat might be disabled, but you can use the Q&A function to ask questions throughout our time together here for the next few minutes. My name is Jen Staley, and I am the Director of Education and Learning at FBLA. So tonight we're going to learn a few more things about competitive events. First of all, I want to introduce our brand new competitive events manager, Lacey Binland-Kirk. She comes to us from Arizona, where she has an extensive background in career and technical student organizations. So Lacey is on day 2 of her time here at National FBLA. So you can reach out to her if you have any questions about competitive events. But she will be backstage with Kent Storm, our Senior Director of Member Support and Operations, and answering any questions that you have about competitive events tonight. So thank you, Lacey, and welcome. Would you like to say a few words?
Hi, thanks for having me, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you in the upcoming future. So let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Lacey. So I do want to share a disclaimer. Tonight's webinar is going to be focused on things that are specific to National FBLA and competitive events that will be happening at the National Leadership Conference. Many states, many district or region or area or section, whatever you call it in your state, will be doing different guidelines throughout the whole process of getting to National Leadership Conference. So if you have any questions about the district level or the state level, please make sure to reach out to those specific leaders and ask your specific questions. So again, today we're going to be talking about things that specifically pertain to the National Leadership Conference and give you a broad overview of competitive events. So tonight we will be talking about the competitive events resources, and then we'll be doing a category review of our objective tests, our presentations, our role plays, and our production events. And then along the way, I'll be sharing some nuggets of wisdom for best practices for you preparing your students for competitions. So by the numbers, we have 151 competitive events at the national level. And you can see the breakdown between all 3 divisions. Middle school has 32, high school has 76, and collegiate has 43 events that your students can participate in. So again, this disclaimer that we're going to be talking about things that are specific to National Leadership Conference, your state, your district, or your region, your areas, your section, whatever they call it, might be doing things very similar to the National Leadership Conference. But if you do have any questions about those specific competitions, please make sure to reach out to your state leader. Once again, we will be recording this webinar, and we will make this webinar and the slides available through the advisor alert and the advisor resource page on the website. So now let's dive into our first category, which are objective tests. Throughout our presentation tonight, we're going to be talking about and highlighting the new events in each one of these categories. These aren't the only events that exist in these specific categories, but want to call out new events. And you'll see that we have several new events in the objective test categories at the middle school, the high school, and the collegiate level. Everything from exploring accounting and finance from the middle school area to real estate and project management at high school, and the business law and foundations of digital design at the collegiate level. A broad overview of all of the objective tests for middle school, high school, and collegiate. That for middle school, there are 50 multiple choice questions, and those are 4 options for students to choose at a 30-minute time limit. High school and collegiate also has the 4 multiple choice options for 100 questions and a 50-minute time limit. So all of the divisions will have objective tests. We do have a few updates in terminology that I will be sharing here, but we'll be talking about the knowledge areas and objectives, the scoring, how that happens, some sample test questions, and some best practices. But your guidelines for each and every one of these 151 competitive events are going to be your go-to. So in the guidelines, you'll see that there's an event overview and educational alignments will be showcased, all the way through study guide, which includes the knowledge areas and competencies. So I'd like for us to go out of this slideshow and go directly to the website. So with the website, you can see that there are 3 different division areas: middle school, high school, and collegiate. And you can scroll down to go to competitive events in each one of those divisions. So we'll start out with middle school in regards to objective tests. So you'll scroll down a little bit and let's find an objective test that is available. Let's start out with exploring accounting and finance. So exploring accounting and finance, here's the example of the competitive events guidelines and how to read it. So for the competitive events guidelines for the objective test, and actually all of the guidelines for competitive events will be laid out very similarly. There will be an event overview that showcases the division, the event type. Is it an individual or a team event? Is it an event what event category is it? And what are the elements of that specific competition? Then we have some educational alignments, and we have aligned all of our events to advance CTE's Career Cluster Framework and also to our NACE competencies. So you can click on the links in the guidelines to learn more information about those educational standards that we are aligned to. Specifically in objective tests, you will see knowledge areas. In the past, this was called competencies. So this year and moving forward, we are calling these knowledge areas. These are big buckets of knowledge areas that students will need to know or will be tested on in these objective tests. So you'll see personal finance, foundational accounting knowledge, all the way through careers. And then you'll see a test competition or composition graph that showcases the number of test questions in each one of those knowledge areas. At the end of the competitive event guidelines, you will see the knowledge areas are broken up into objectives, and I'll talk about some best practices from there. At the national level, there's a chart that showcases what the items that students need to bring to the national level. You'll want to make sure to ask at the state or district or region level what items that the competitor must provide. But here you'll see a sharpened pencil, a fully powered device for online testing, and so on and so forth. There are links here for you to click and learn more about, for instance, this one, the fully powered device for online testing. If you go to that link, it gives you access to a sample test that students can do to get prepared for the National Leadership Conference and feel confident in using that online testing platform. There's some important FBLA documents, some eligibility requirements that you and your students can read through, as long as, and also reiterating that event administration of objective tests specifically. And then in each one of the guidelines, there's an area talking about scoring. So you'll see that there are no points deducted for incorrect answers in the objective test arena, and that there are tiebreakers that are followed. Please make sure to share this with your students because the tiebreakers really do make or break students at the national level. So we've seen some students that score the same score, and it comes down to the third tiebreaker, which is the time component of that. So please make sure to let your students know of these guidelines so they are aware that that if tiebreakers do exist, that this is how they are determined. We do not recognize co-first place or co-second place at the national level. Scrolling through, you'll see some more information. And then at the very bottom, you will see the study guide area. This is where those knowledge areas that I was talking about are broken down into objectives. So here in the personal finance area, that's the knowledge area. And then there are 7 objectives underneath that personal finance area. Many times you might see some of these random letters and numbers after each one of the objectives. If you do see that, you should read this, this caveat, this paragraph at the beginning of the study guide. This showcases that we are partnering with MBA Research, and MBA Research has some assessments, learning activity packages that might go along well with this specific objective. So to learn more, you can go to mbaresearch.org/FBLA. But some best practices that we've heard in the past is some students might look through this study guide and say, you know, personal finance, I'm not feeling super confident about this. So especially explaining the nature of tax liabilities, we've heard of some students copying and pasting that actual objective into Google and then reading the top 3 links that come up to learn more about tax liabilities. There are also some Quizlets that are available out there on the World Wide Web. However, I do want to make a disclaimer and a caveat that many of our objective tests have gone through a competency update where we moved our competencies into knowledge areas and objectives. So just make sure that as your students are using Quizlets, that they are confirming that the items in the Quizlet match up with the knowledge areas and the objectives listed out in the study guide. So with the updates from last year to this year, there might be some gaps in some of the things that are missing from a Quizlet, or there might be additional items in the Quizlet that no longer are represented in the objectives. I'm going to scroll back up because we've called out in the guidelines this year some sample preparation resources. And if you click on this link here to go to FBLA Connect, it will take you to a website where you can find more information on how to go to FBLA. There's a link showing how to get to these sample documents. So in order to get to these preparation resources, they're only available to you as advisors or to your members that have an account within FBLA Connect. So let's go ahead and go back to the competitive events site, and I'll show you how to get to those prep resources. You'll scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says preparation resources, and then you'll log in to Connect. And mine might look exactly the same as yours, but you'll see some samples that will be included within FBLA Connect. And under sample objective tests, you will see a list of all of these sample questions that you can click on and give to your students so that way they can get a little taste of what the questions will look like and if this is a topic that they may or may not want to pursue. This exists for middle school, for high school, and for collegiate divisions. So again, that information is found in FBLA Connect, and the link is on the website. I do want to remind you if you do have any questions throughout our process, our webinar here, to make sure to click the Q&A and Kent Storm and Lacey Beanland Kirk are backstage answering all sorts of questions that you do have. So back to our next category of events, which are presentation events. So we finished our competitive events for our overview of the objective test. Now we're on to the presentation area. So again, there are lots of different competitions that are in the presentation area, presentation category in FBLA, but the overview of this, we're showcasing all of the new competitions that are in the presentation area. We have everything from exploring animation at the middle school level to supply chain management, which was a test last year but has morphed into a presentation event this year at the high school level. And then at the collegiate level, we do have both presentations and case competitions that are acting like presentations. So at collegiate level, there's a new digital design and communications case competition. So there's no overview of the presentations because each one of the presentations have very separate guidelines that have very different elements to each one of them. So I'm going to tell you to go directly to the competitive events guidelines as they are, and that's where you will find all of the information for the specific competitive events presentation event. But we're going to show the guidelines here, and we're going to go into some event administration pieces to show you what to expect during the preliminary round, during the final round, and also the secret sauce. So let's again go back to our competitive events area of the website. So now we'll go to the high school arena. So high school and competitive events. Let's scroll down and find a presentation event. So first of all, I found business plan as the first one that I saw. So let's go to the business plan competitive events guidelines. So the competitive events guidelines are going to look very similar to the objective test guidelines. There's the event overview, the educational alignments, some information for perhaps your state adds additional information for the district or the state level. But then at the national level, there are two rounds. There's a preliminary round and a finals round. So you'll see on the table of the required competition items, the things that the students must provide during the preliminary presentation versus the final presentation. You'll see the same thing as the objective test guidelines, the important FBLA documents, the eligibility guidelines, and then the event administration. So you want to make sure that you're checking out the event administration because this is where you're going to find the meat of the information that you need to know and your students need to know in order to prepare for competitive events at the competition level. I'm going to scroll back up here to the top where it talks about the event elements. You'll see business plan has a prejudged asset and a presentation. So scrolling back down, the event administration will show three different areas. It talks about the prejudged asset as far as the details that are needed for that. So calling out a few things, the prejudged asset for the business plan competitive event is a report. So a PDF of the report does need to be uploaded in the National Leadership Conference registration system by the state specified deadline. So you'll need to check with your state leader on that specific deadline. Most often for middle school and high school, they are going to be at the end of April or beginning of May. And then for collegiate, it might be closer to maybe the end of March or mid-April. So you'll want to check with your state leader on the deadline for the National Leadership Conference, as well as any deadlines for your district or state level. You'll see under the event specific information, this is where you'll find specifications on that prejudged asset or whatever it is. So you'll see here the report can be no more than 17 pages. And then this is where it talks about, for instance, with business plan, the reports will follow this specific sequence. And so it outlines here's the sequence that the students need to follow in order to get points on their rating sheet for that. Then you'll see the preliminary presentation details are all listed out. At the National Leadership Conference, students are given 3 minutes to set up their equipment, 7 minutes to present, and then 3 minutes for a Q&A. Then you'll see the venue and the format. So presentations will take place in a large open area with a designated space of about 10 by 10. So if you are going to be bringing props to the competitive events area, you'll want to make sure that it does fit within the 10 by 10 area, and also know that there will be a table and chairs for the judges. So we don't have a specific amount of space for the students to know how to set up, but I would imagine that they would have probably close to 10 by 5 maybe. So again, thinking through what does this look like for you and your students if you are going to be bringing props. Now we talk about props and then we talk about technology. Sometimes technology does include internet. For business plan, the competition that we're looking at right now, there is no internet provided. But if there is internet provided at the National Leadership Conference, we will give students the password to log into the Wi-Fi. However, one of the things that we've seen time and time again is there are situations where the school issued computer won't connect to the Wi-Fi because of security settings, or we've seen things in the past for website design where Wix decides to go down during the National Leadership Conference, or something else happens where the students aren't able to get connected to the internet. A best practice is to make sure that you are practicing with your students on a plan B. Plan A would be we're going to get connected to the internet and we're going to move forward as if nothing has happened. Or everything is running smoothly. But the plan B is working with your students in case something happens with the internet and they aren't able to get connected within that 3 minute time frame to set up. What are the students going to do? What is a plan B? Do you have screenshots of the website that you can bring up? Do you have a plan B presentation? Do you have some other way to showcase your students' presentation or the code or coding in the coding and programming world? So just think through what does that look like for a plan B if the students aren't able to get connected to the internet. That will help the students feel a lot more successful and prepared for a plan A and a plan B. So you'll scroll through and you'll see some restricted items. I'm going to call out a few things. This was an update that was included last year. Links and QR codes are not allowed in the pre-judge asset. Links and QR codes are can be shown during the presentation component, but the judges and other people should not be required and should not be scanning or clicking on any links or QR codes to learn more. The students can show where a QR code goes to. However, we have judges that are not comfortable with scanning QR codes on their phones or might not have their phones readily available to scan QR codes. You'll see listed out here in the competitive events guidelines some event specific information. And so in the business plan competition, you'll see that here are the things the students should be talking about during their presentation of the business plan. The final presentation details will probably look very similar to the preliminary presentation details. However, there are some changes, so you'll want to make sure to review all of these with your students. One of the questions we get time and time again at the national level is how do you determine who moves on to the finals round? So we've written that out in our competitive events guidelines. So if there are 2 sections at the National Leadership Conference, we'll take the top 6 from each section and so on and so forth. So you know if there are 5 sections from the competitive events arena, that the top 2 from each one of the sections advance to the finals round. Scoring. I'll point out a big change from last year to this year in regards to scoring at the National Leadership Conference. This is specific to events that have a prejudged asset. This year, the prejudged asset score will be added to the preliminary presentation score for a score that determines who moves on to the finals round. Those finalists, the top 10, are determined solely based off of the final presentation around. So the prejudged asset will not be added, that score will not be added to the final score. So that is a change from previous years. So this is the secret sauce. We have many people have said there is a secret sauce and I need to know what it is. And the secret sauce are in these rating sheets. These rating sheets are the same rating sheets that students see, that advisors see, that judges see. So these are the same rating sheets. There's nothing hidden from you as an advisor or from your students as members that are competing. So these rating sheets are where it's at. So have your students take these rating sheets, have them practice with their parents or guardians, have them practice with their peers, have them practice with your school administrators, practice with the advisory council that you have for your CTE courses. Choose some other people, other adults that aren't super familiar with FBLA, and have students see all of the different ranges of scores. So this is where the rating sheet will come in super handy. However, at the end of the day, the judges that we have judging at all of these levels are all humans, and they will all interpret these guidelines and these rating sheets differently. So having your students exposed to lots of different people that have filled out these rating sheets will help your students maybe find a sweet spot to make sure that all of these things are covered. Another best practice is to take that exceeds expectations column for the presentation component. I will scroll down here in the business plan arena. So it says 3 or more aspects of marketing to increase company presentation is explained. So this is where I recommend that students literally parrot the language that is in the exceeds expectation column that can help judges that might be fatigued or might have heard the same presentation over and over again. This is something that will help judges identify that the students, or may help the judges identify that the students are giving them things within the exceeds expectations column. So it might be one of those things that students are going to say, we're going to tell you three aspects of marketing to increase our company. And then they might share those 3 things. And then at the end of those 3 things, they can say, so hopefully you can see the 3 aspects of marketing to increase our company's presence. So that way the students have said this, the judges, if they're paying attention and are looking at the rating sheet, will say, hey, they said that multiple times. Those are some best practices that are included in the business plan or any presentation component. Now we'll head back to our presentation for our next category of events, and those are role plays. So role plays exist in all 3 levels or all 3 divisions, middle school, high school, and collegiate. There are no new role plays in the high school division. However, there are still role plays that do exist in all 3 divisions. So middle school is adding exploring customer service. High school customer service is the new name for client service from the past. And then collegiate also is adding customer service. These guidelines, this is like taking the presentations and the objective test component in some cases and laying them on top of each other. So let's do another dive into the guidelines for the competitive events arena and role plays. So let's find a role play here. Entrepreneurship is the first one that I see. In the middle school and the collegiate levels, the role plays do not have a preliminary round that includes an objective test. So the preliminaries rounds for middle school and collegiate will look different than this entrepreneurship example that I'm showing you right now from the high school area. From the high school division, if you are going to be participating in a role play, all role plays will look similar to the setup of entrepreneurship. So now that we've been through objective test and presentation events, these guidelines are going to look super familiar to you. You'll see the event elements here include an objective test and an interactive role play. So the objective test component will have the knowledge areas and the objectives that are included in the study guide later, as well as the rating sheet for the role play. So you'll see the required competition items for the objective test and for the role play guidelines are listed out there for the competitors. The same items are listed out for the competitors and then for the objective test. And then I want to point out a few things that people miss in the role play events. So every competitor gets to take the online objective test that happens on site at the National Leadership Conference. How do we determine who goes to the finals round? It's listed here in the guidelines. It shows that the team averaged objective test score determines the top 15 teams that advance to the role play or the finals round. So you will see also something that gets students tripped up is that the role play is listed out as an interactive role play. So that means that the judges may be interacting and asking questions within that 7-minute presentation time. So students have to think on their feet. They're given a topic and they have 20 minutes to prepare for that presentation area. And then they have to be able to go back and forth. Maybe the judges won't ask any questions in those 7 minutes. Maybe the judges will interrupt them to ask questions. So as you are preparing your students for this role play, you can do both ways as far as asking judges or your guest judges to interrupt the students so that way the students can get familiar with what it means to not be able to get through all of the things that they want to during their 7 minutes. And you can have your guest judges not do anything throughout that 7 minutes. Again, our judges are all human beings and that some of them follow directions, some of them get way into the role play scenario and want to have lots of interaction with the students, and other judges for role plays might sit back and let the students share all of their ideas. Every situation is going to be completely different, and so this is a part of the uniqueness of this role play because it's not a prepared thing prior to coming on site. So a few things to point out here to reiterate. That first preliminary round is the objective test. So in the guidelines, you'll see the knowledge areas and the objectives. And then at the very end of these competitive events guidelines, you will see that entrepreneurship role play presentation rating sheet. So a change from last year to this year, client service has become customer service and also has a test added to it. So now all role plays for the high school competitive events category have a test component, and all have the top 15 scores move on to the second round. So now going back to those sample preparation resources, there is a sample role play in each one of the divisions. So if you click into that specific division, you will see many sample role plays available. These are all available to you as teachers as Word documents, so you can download them, you can change them, you can update them, you can use them in your classroom, or you can use as is, you can make updates, and you can use this to help prepare your students for the role play component. With these specific competitions that are sample role plays, these are not just sample role plays, these are role plays that have been used at the district, state, and national level for the last several years. So these have all come into play, and this is exactly what the students have seen if they participated in these role plays in the past. Now moving back to our slideshow, our last category is in regards to production tests. So our production tests exist in middle school, high school, and the collegiate levels. So the new production tests at the middle school level, we have slide deck applications, spreadsheet applications, and word processing. At the high school and the collegiate level, we have just computer applications. I want to let you know that database is no longer a part of the computer applications production test. It includes slide deck applications, spreadsheet applications, and the word processing. Another big change in production tests is that there's no longer an objective test at the National Leadership Conference. So these guidelines should look super familiar to you. There is one change with or update or something that looks different with the production tests, and that is the last bullet on this slide, which is the production test reference guide. So again, let's dive into one of the competitions that is all about production. So I'll go to collegiate here and go to that specific computer applications. So again, you'll see the same outline. You will see knowledge areas. There's not a test composition available for this because there is no objective test. There's just a production test. What that means is that students are given a series of tasks that they need to do within the time window that showcases their skills in that specific knowledge area. And you'll see the items that the competitor must provide include a printed production test reference guide, which I'll show you here in a minute. But one of the things that that is a myth that I have heard in the competitive events arena is that the production test reference guide is to be used for all competitive events. And the production test reference guide, we changed it. It was called the format guide up until last year. And we changed it to say the production test reference guide because this is something that students can bring a printed copy of the production test reference guide with them to the National Leadership Conference to use, to refer to throughout their tasks that they are doing within the time window that they have for the actual production tests. So no longer the production test reference guide is only used for those specific competitions that have a production test associated with it. You'll also note that there are no rating sheets to the production test because the production test tasks look different from each level. So within the production test, that the tasks that the students are given, that they will have a specific rating sheet to that specific production test at that level. Also going back to our Connect area, you will see within each one of the districts that we have given sample production tests. So that way the students can get a look and feel for some of the tasks that have been asked in the past or they may be asked this year or in the future. So if you were brand new to production tests, this would be a great place to start. And if you're teaching any of the Microsoft Office suite, this would be something that you could take a look at. Also, these tests are created so that way they're not specific to a Microsoft product. It could be Microsoft, it could be Google. Some of the things are interchangeable. So slide deck applications, you'll note we didn't call it PowerPoint production tests. We called it slide deck applications. So now I want to take the time that we have for the next few minutes to explore all of the things that are available to you on the national website. So I'm going to be using the FBLA High School division for this particular conversation, but you'll see that there are any announcements. So any announcements that we have throughout the year that are big ticket items, we'll make sure to put in the announcement section. So as we prepare for National Leadership Conference, one of the things that might show up in late spring is the competitive events tentative schedule would be shown here, as well as the competitive events schedule will be showing up here under the announcements section. If you scroll down, I've gone through, here are some of the guidelines, but I want to call your attention to a couple of other things that we have as far as interactive components to the website. And that is the event category. If you have a student that is like, no way, no how are you getting me up in front of judges to do anything, then you can say, okay, well then the objective test might be the route that you want to go. If you click on that, only the objective test will show up in this website. Also, you can click through the event type. One of the things that is specific to the high school division, if you do see an event that says Introduction to, that means it is for ninth or 10th graders only. All the other events are open to ninth to 12th graders, but if you have a freshman or a sophomore and you want to see, okay, what are some individual events that are only available to my ninth and 10th graders, you can click on that filter. It will filter out, and here are the events that are available to your freshmen and sophomores. We've also added filters for both career clusters and new this year for any NACE competencies. So if you have to talk to your administration and say, hey, why are you using these competitive events in your classroom? You can connect it back to both the career clusters and to the NACE competencies. So you can click on one of these and you can see all of the competitive events that relate to that specific competency. So to make sure to showcase that filter that is available on the National FBLA website. One of the other things that I want to spend a little bit of time on is on the resources part of this. You can click on the view resources that will take you all the way down to the bottom of this page after each one of the competitive events guidelines, or you can scroll all the way down. But you'll see some competitive events resources that might be helpful to you. A NACE crosswalk, that's all in one. Here it is, all guidelines with the rating sheets. So if you don't want to click on each one of those 76 guidelines individually and print them, you can come here, see all of the 76 or 23 or 32, however many from the middle school or collegiate level. If you wanted to see them all together, you can click on this link. However, please note before you hit print that this all guidelines is 585 pages at the high school level. So just know that before you hit print. We also have career cluster alignments, and then there's a choose your event. And so I went to showcase if you have a student that's like, I have no idea what I want to do, then this is a fun little interactive thing that students can quickly do to go through to see what sample events might interest them. Do you want to present in front of judges? Yeah, I love that. Do you want to work on a team? Yes. Do you want to work on a project that can involve the whole chapter? Not so much. Are you in ninth or 10th grade? Nope, I'm a junior. And do you want to work on a project that showcases? No. And yep, I'm okay with this. So then right here, you can see after that series of questions, it's given me these three options for me to look at as a competitor as far as what might interest me. So choose your event might be a fun activity to do if you haven't already during a chapter meeting or in your classes. There's competitive events descriptions. This is probably about 5 pages where it just showcases all of the event descriptions. There are events that have topics. So I did not showcase events that had a topic, but Here's a document that shows all of the topics in one area. However, these topics are spelled out in each one of the guidelines as well. So you can look and see the different topics that are available here in one area. There is a competitive events policy and procedures manual. This will be updated by the end of the year for the National Leadership Conference 2026 in Vegas and in San Antonio. So look for those updates in early 2026. And then there's a competitive events event at a glance. So this is a good snapshot that showcases all of the events, the team size, the eligible grades, the category, and the different elements. So if you as an advisor want to help students learn the different competitions and the different elements, this is a good at a glance for students to see. We've talked about the preparation resources, and then I'll show you the competitive events production test reference guide. So that is linked here. So again, this is 38 pages. Students that are participating as a production test competitor can print this and bring it with them on site to the National Leadership Conference. We will not have any additional copies on site, so they will need to bring their own copy. But you can see that this was just updated recently, and this has an overview, and then it also goes through, okay, if you are going to be addressing an envelope, this is what it should look like. If you are doing an itinerary, this is what it should look like. So this will be super helpful. This is like the cheat sheet. So this would be something that is, in my opinion, if I were an advisor, non-negotiable to make sure that your production student has going into the production test. There are all sorts of other competitive events, guidelines, and preparation resources that are available to you. If you have previous winners or even competitors, they don't have to win. That is another thing that I feel like is a misnomer in regards to competitive events, is the whole thing of the only thing that the only time students learn anything is if they win, they get up on stage. And that's just not the case. I absolutely love and adore competitive events, and students are learning regardless of how they placed at any of the competition levels. Also, as a former teacher, I loved implementing competitive events in the classroom as project-based learning. So there are many opportunities for you as an advisor, if you are in the classroom as a teacher, to implement some of these competitive events with their rating sheets. This is what you are using to grade the students as well. So it looks like our competitive events team of Kent and Lacey have assisted in answering a lot of the questions. But I will see if there are any other questions that will be asked here. I do see one here about list the steps to the place where students can do the interactive part to find an event to do and participate. So I will take you to that website again. So I'll take you from the very beginning, fbla.org, and then the competitive events website, view resources, and then you will see the choose your event under the competitive events resources page. Somebody asked about clusters. What are they and how do they work? So Advanced CTE is a group that spent several years researching a lot of careers, and they put them into different career clusters. So to learn more about the career clusters, you can click on this link in the competitive events guidelines, and that will take you to an entire website that you can get lost in to learn more about the framework. But it's essentially saying the career clusters is this area of careers, and if your CT administrators or your school administrators are asking how you are connecting to careers, you can showcase that through the national career clusters. There is a question about competitive events and repeat competitors. So we do have a clause in our middle school and our high school competitive events that say if you were in the top 10 at the National Leadership Conference, if you placed in the top 10, you cannot repeat in that competition again in the future. So that is spelled out in the eligibility requirements. And so you'll see that the repeat competitor clause is included in every single one of the guidelines. And the question here was if we had a top 10 winner in client services, can they participate in customer service? So right here in the guidelines, it answers that competitors who placed in the top 10 in client service at a previous national leadership conference are not eligible to compete in this event. Once again, this webinar will be has been recorded, and these slides will be available for review in the local advisor alert that will be coming out this week. There's a QR code on the screen now, or there is a link in the resources page to a survey to complete for this webinar. Thank you so much for attending today. I'll continue to hang out for a few more minutes and answer questions that come in. Hi, Allison. This is a question that we get asked a lot. Are there examples of top 10 winners for new teachers to see, especially reports? There are not official ones that are available for National Leadership Conference. However, you could Google and see if there are former reports that are available out there. One of the reasons why we don't provide access to previous reports is that the guidelines change, and we want to make sure that your students feel comfortable to be innovative and creative and figure out a way to look at the guidelines and work within this year's current guidelines to reach those. But you could try Googling them to see some examples, but just know that it's not exemplars potentially. So things to things to think about. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight, and hopefully you learned something new about competitive events. Best of luck to you and your students, and we hope to see you in Las Vegas or in San Antonio. Thank you.